Boston was radiant, illuminated by fireworks that streaked the sky with vibrant colors, reflecting the joy and anticipation in the air. The crowd was gathered in one of the city's most beautiful parks, where a spring celebration was taking place. The aroma of popcorn and cotton candy floated, mixing with the laughter and excited whispers of the people. And at the center of this frenzy, with a racing heart, was Benoit. Benoit stood out in the crowd, not only because he was an irresistibly charming French romantic, but because he was about to make the most important proposal of his life. Anxiety pulsed through his veins as he looked at Lucy, who was just a few steps away. Her brown hair fluttered in the wind, and her eyes sparkled like stars under the light of the fireworks. Benoit knew that at that moment, he could not hesitate. With a determined movement, he knelt on the ground, holding a small case that contained a sparkling ring. The murmur of the crowd diminished, and all eyes turned to them. Lucy, surprised, brought her hands to her face, her eyes wide in a mix of astonishment and joy. "Benoit, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice almost lost in the sound of the fireworks. "Lucy," he began, his voice firm but full of tenderness, "you are the reason my heart sings. From the first moment I saw you, I knew you would be the only one for me. Will you marry me?" A nearly palpable silence fell before he opened the case, revealing the ring that gleamed under the lights of the party. Lucy was paralyzed, her heart beating fast. The crowd waited anxiously, as if each of them were holding their breath, waiting for the answer. "Benoit," Lucy hesitated, her mind floating between the happiness of the moment and the echoes of disapproval that always haunted her. The shadow of her family, a conservative clan that disapproved of the relationship, hovered over her like a dark cloud. But looking into Benoit's eyes, she saw love, sincerity, and a promise of happiness. "Yes," she exclaimed finally, as tears formed in her eyes. The crowd erupted in applause. Shouts of joy and celebration echoed through the park, while Benoit, beaming, placed the ring on her finger. The fireworks burst in a spectacle of colors, and the two embraced, lost in a passionate kiss that seemed to last an eternity. After the storm of emotions, Lucy, though still wrapped in happiness, was overcome by a sense of confusion. The party continued around her, but she felt an urgent need to escape the frenzy and find a secluded corner to think. The heat of the moment began to dissipate, and the voices of the crowd became a distant echo. She walked away, heading towards a small adjacent garden, where the flowers were in full bloom. The sweet scent of rose petals enveloped her, but her mind was far from there. Lucy leaned against a tree, her heart still racing, but now gripped by fear and uncertainty. What would her family say? How would they react to knowing she had accepted to marry Benoit? Meanwhile, Benoit, still radiant and full of hope, began to look for her among the crowd. He was sure that this was the best decision of their lives, but Lucy's absence made him uneasy. He moved away from the group of friends that surrounded him and searched for her, calling her name. "Lucy?" he shouted, his voice filled with worry. The sound of the fireworks had become a distant background as he anxiously searched for his beloved. Where are you? Finally, he found her, leaning against a tree, with her eyes fixed on the ground as if she was fighting an internal storm. Benoit approached, feeling the weight of anxiety in the air. "Love, are you okay?" he asked, gently touching her arm. She raised her eyes, and he saw the mix of joy and confusion that inhabited them. "Benoit, I love you, but," her voice faltered, and she looked at the ground, as if the weight of tradition and disapproval was crushing her heart. "But nothing can separate us," he said, determined. "We will face this together. You are the only one that matters to me." Lucy took a deep breath, knowing that the battle was just beginning. The happiness of the moment mixed with worry, leaving her with a knot in her stomach. She knew that their love would be tested in ways she could never imagine. Lucy was sitting on her bed, her eyes fixed on the engagement ring that gleamed under the soft light of the lamp. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, echoing the emotion of Benoit's proposal. But as the euphoria dissipated, reality set in. The smile that had lit up her face now became a mask of worry. She knew that the happiness she had experienced in that magical moment at the celebration was fleeting. The shadow of family disapproval loomed over her like a dark cloud. When she descended the stairs to the living room, the atmosphere was tense. Her parents were sitting at the table, and her mother's expression, Marie, was a mix of disbelief and disappointment. Lucy took a deep breath, trying to muster the courage to share the news that could transform her world. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something important," she said, her voice trembling. "Important?" Her father, Henri, raised an eyebrow, his ironic tone revealing that he already feared what was coming next. "What could be more important than the honor of our family?" Lucy hesitated, but determination pushed her forward. "I am engaged. Benoit proposed to me during the celebration." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucy's mother was the first to break the tension. "That Frenchman? You can't be serious." Her voice exploded in indignation. "Do you know what he is, Lucy? Do you know about his past?" "No, Mom. He is a wonderful man. He truly loves me." Lucy tried to defend Benoit, but her mother's anger interrupted her words. "Wonderful or not, we cannot forget the rivalry between our families. You cannot put yourself at risk like this," Marie exclaimed, her eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what he can do, what he can bring into our life." Benoit, for his part, was anxious as he walked down the street towards the cafe where he had agreed to meet Lucy. He already knew that her family's resistance would not be easy to overcome, but the hope of a future together propelled him forward. However, upon arrival, he felt a chill down his spine. Lucy's father, Henri, was waiting for him, arms crossed and a stern expression on his face. "You shouldn't be here," Henri said, his voice low and threatening. "I don't want you near my daughter again." Benoit, surprised, tried to maintain his composure. "Sir, I love Lucy. I want to make her my wife. Please, give me a chance to prove that I am worthy of her." "Worthy?" Henri laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. "You are meddling in something you do not understand. Our family's history is old and deep. I will not hesitate to ensure you do not harm her. If you value your life, you better stay away." With a heavy heart, Benoit walked away, his hopes shattered like broken glass. He needed to find Lucy, needed to understand what to do next. Meanwhile, Lucy was lost in thought, torn between the love she felt and loyalty to her family. She felt like a bridge between two worlds that did not understand each other. At the cafe, Lucy finally spotted Benoit. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw him enter, but soon fear overcame her. She knew he had been confronted by her father, and that made her even more uneasy. "Lucy," Benoit began, his piercing eyes searching hers. "What happened? You seem distant." I don't know, Benoit. My mother. She doesn't accept our relationship. She's scared, and my father." Her words failed, and tears began to slip down Lucy's face. "They won't allow it. I can't defy them." Benoit leaned over the table, determination burning in his gaze. "We can face this together. We can't let the past determine our future. What we feel is real, and that should be enough." "But what if it's not?" Lucy asked, her voice breaking. "What if all this ends in pain?" "Then we will face that pain together. I will not give up on you, Lucy. What we have is rare and precious. Love can overcome any obstacle, even those that seem insurmountable." Lucy looked into his eyes and, for a brief moment, everything seemed possible. But deep down, doubt and fear choked her hope. She knew the road ahead would be full of challenges, but the promise of true love offered a glimmer of hope amid the chaos. Lucy walked quickly through the streets of Boston, her heart still racing after the meeting at the cafe with Benoit. The vibrant atmosphere of the city seemed distant, as if a mist had settled between her and the world. The weight of family expectations followed her like a shadow, and when she looked back, she had the feeling that her cousin, Thomas, was closer than she had imagined. He had always been one of the most jealous in the family, and now his presence made her feel a chill down her spine. "You shouldn't be alone, Lucy," he intercepted her, blocking her path with a challenging look. "I think you need a bit of protection." Lucy forced a smile, trying to hide her nervousness. "Thomas, I'm just going home. I can take care of myself." "Oh, but can you really?" he asked, sarcasm evident in his voice. "They say you are involved with that Frenchman. My God, do you really think that's a good idea? You know what he is, don't you?" His words hit her like a punch in the stomach. Lucy felt a mix of anger and despair. "Benoit is a good person. You don't know him like I do." Thomas crossed his arms, his expression becoming more serious. "And you really think this will end well? If you don't step away, you'll get into a mess you won't be able to resolve. I can't let you do this. You can't decide what's best for me, Thomas." Lucy shouted, her voice echoing in the empty streets. "I love Benoit." "Love? This is just a phase, Lucy," he retorted, stepping closer to her. "You need to think about the consequences. I'm going to tell your parents. They deserve to know the truth." A shiver ran down Lucy's spine. The thought of her parents finding out about Benoit terrified her. "You wouldn't," she said, her voice now lower, almost pleading. "Try me, and you'll see," Thomas replied, with a determined look. "You can't fight our family. It's not worth it." She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I won't walk away from him. I can't." With that, Lucy walked away, her heart in turmoil. Thomas watched her for a moment, and then, with a triumphant smile, decided to follow. Meanwhile, in the small kitchen of a modest apartment, Benoit was absorbed in his thoughts. He had planned a romantic meeting, an escape for the two, far from all the intrigues and difficulties. But at the same time, the shadow of Lucy's cousin loomed over his plans. He could not allow anything to disrupt their love. He needed to be brave. With renewed determination, Benoit picked up his phone and sent a message to Lucy. "Shall we meet tonight? I have a surprise for you." He waited anxiously for the response, but the message did not arrive. His heart raced with every passing second. Finally, the phone vibrated. "Yes. Where and when?" Lucy's reply came, and he couldn't help but smile. "At 8 p.m., in the park by the lake. I'll be waiting." When the clock struck 8 p.m., Benoit was on the verge of anxiety. He had prepared a small basket with wine and macarons, something he knew Lucy loved. Seeing the light's reflections on the water, he felt hopeful. But before he could relax, Thomas appeared, interrupting his thoughts. "Benoit," he said, his voice full of disdain. "What do you think you're doing here?" Benoit raised his head, defying him. "I'm waiting for Lucy. What do you want?" "I want you to stay away. You don't belong in this world. And if you don't, I won't hesitate to tell her what I know," Thomas threatened, his fierce gaze. The tension between the two increased, and Benoit felt the anger rising within him. "I love Lucy, and you can't decide for her. If she wants to be with me, that's between us." Thomas took a step forward, close enough for Benoit to smell the threat in his breath. "If you hurt her, you won't like the consequences." At that moment, Lucy appeared, and seeing the dispute between the two, her heart sank. "What is happening here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Benoit is trying to get involved in something he can't control," Thomas replied, his expression triumphant. "No, Thomas, stop," Lucy shouted, and the tension hung in the air, like a thread about to snap. She looked at Benoit, her eyes full of concern. "Let's go, Benoit. This won't end well." Benoit, devastated, saw Lucy's decision forming in her eyes. The hope he had nurtured dissolved in an instant, and he realized that their love would face an even greater challenge. "Lucy, wait," he pleaded, but she had already walked away, her heart as heavy as his. Benoit sat in his small painting studio, the white walls adorned with his works, each telling a part of his story. The vibrant colors that once brought him joy now seemed faded, like his hope. He was surrounded by tubes of paint and brushes, but inspiration had abandoned him. The marriage proposal, which should have been a pinnacle of happiness, had turned into a torment. He looked out the window, watching the passers-by who, oblivious to his pain, went on with their lives. With a heavy heart, he remembered Lucy's smile and the way her eyes sparkled in front of the crowd. But now, everything seemed distant, almost like a dream fading away. Meanwhile, Lucy wandered the streets of Boston, trying to distract herself with everyday life. But Benoit's absence was like a constant shadow. She felt lost, as if a fundamental part of herself had been ripped away. The weight of her family's disapproval tormented her, and the idea of staying away from Benoit was unbearable. "Why is this so difficult?" she murmured to herself as she passed by a park where she used to meet him. Memories flooded her like a wave, and she felt the urge to run to him, to embrace him and never let go. One morning, in an attempt to find solace, Lucy decided to visit an old friend, Julian. He had always been a wise and understanding advisor. When she arrived at the cafe where they used to meet, she noticed he was already waiting for her, a welcoming smile on his face. "Lucy, it's been so long," Julian exclaimed, standing up to greet her. "Please sit down. What happened?" She sighed, trying to organize her thoughts before speaking. "It's about Benoit. My family doesn't accept our relationship. They don't see how much we love each other. I don't know what to do." Julian looked at her sincerely. "Have you ever wondered what you really want? What does your heart say?" "I love Benoit," Lucy replied, her voice trembling. "But what if my family is right? What if he isn't the man I imagine?" Julian leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her. "True love doesn't rely on external opinions, Lucy. It's a choice you make every day. If you believe Benoit is the one, fight for him." Julian's words resonated in her mind as she returned home. That night, in a moment of clarity and determination, Lucy took paper and pen. With hesitant handwriting, she began to write a letter to Benoit, promising that they would find a way to overcome the obstacles. "My love, no matter what happens, I will always be by your side," she wrote, feeling hope grow within her. But when she finished, a shadow fell over her heart as she thought about how to deliver it. Unfortunately, the letter never reached Benoit. As Lucy tucked it into a notebook, her mother entered the room, her eyes penetrating. "What are you doing, Lucy?" she asked, with a tone of authority that made her shrink back. She hesitated but couldn't hide the letter. "It's just something I am writing." Her mother took the notebook, opening it unceremoniously. When her eyes fell on the letter, a mix of anger and concern settled on her face. "You're still thinking about that Frenchman? After everything we've talked about? He isn't what you think, Mom. I love him." Lucy responded, her voice choked. "You don't understand." "I understand more than you think," her mother retorted, her voice tense. "And that is exactly why I am worried. His past may repeat itself, and I can't let you get hurt." Her mother's words echoed in Lucy's mind, causing internal conflict. She wanted to believe that love could overcome everything, but doubts tormented her. The conversation turned into a heated argument, but Lucy felt trapped, not knowing how to defend herself. "You need to understand, Mom," she shouted, frustration taking over. "I can't live a life without Benoit. He is my future." But her mother, with a heavy heart, didn't seem willing to yield. Lucy, feeling the pressure mounting, decided she needed some time to think. She stepped away, her gaze lost, while her mother watched her with an expression of concern. Alone in her room, Lucy looked out the window towards the horizon. The sky was beginning to darken, and she felt the loneliness tightening around her heart. What should have been a moment of happiness had now turned into a labyrinth of uncertainties. But even so, an inner voice whispered that her love for Benoit was strong enough to face any storm. And so, with renewed purpose, she decided she needed to find a way to reunite with him, regardless of the difficulties they would face. Lucy was sitting on the living room sofa, her heart pounding uncontrollably, while her mother, Catherine, held the letter she had written to Benoit. Her mother's gaze was a mix of anger and concern, making her shiver. "How could you do this, Lucy?" Catherine asked, her voice trembling with indignation. "You know your happiness is not the only factor to consider. Benoit's past. I always knew this could happen." Lucy stood up, her eyes filled with tears. "Mom, you don't understand. What I feel for him is real. Benoit is not who you think he is. He is kind, creative, and makes me happy. Happiness isn't enough, my daughter. What happened to your grandfather and the rivalry between our families? Do you really think that can be forgotten? You are putting your life at risk for a love that might not last." Catherine responded, her voice firm but with a touch of despair. Lucy felt a wave of rebellion grow within her. And what if I don't care about what happened in the past? What if I choose to love Benoit, even if it means defying our family? Love is stronger than any old rivalry. Catherine took a deep breath, trying to find words that weren't just a shout of protest. You need to think about the consequences, Lucy. I don't want you to suffer like I did. What happened to your grandfather was devastating. We can't let history repeat itself. Determined not to be discouraged, Lucy decided she needed to see Benoit. The park where they used to meet was in full bloom, with colorful flowers dancing in the gentle breeze. When she arrived, she saw Benoit sitting on a bench, his smile lighting up his face. He stood up when he saw her, his eyes shining with emotion. "Lucy," he exclaimed, wrapping her in a tight hug. "I was worried. I haven't heard from you since the last time." "I know, Benoit. We need to talk," she said, pulling him to a more secluded part of the park. "My mother read the letter I wrote. She doesn't accept our love." Benoit frowned, concern etched on his face. "I'm sorry about that, my love. I don't want you to have problems because of me." "Don't worry about that," Lucy replied, looking into his eyes. "I'm willing to fight for us. I promise our story won't end here. I love you." He took her hand, holding it firmly. "And I love you, Lucy. Together, we can overcome anything." They exchanged promises of eternal love, but the moment was interrupted when a family friend, Pierre, appeared, watching them with an inquisitive look. "Lucy, what are you doing here with him?" Pierre asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "You know this won't end well. Benoit is a good man, Pierre." "You don't know what you're talking about," Lucy replied, trying to stay calm. Pierre smiled ironically. "Do you really think your family will accept this? I can tell them everything if necessary." He walked away, leaving a feeling of tension in the air. "That Pierre won't stop, Lucy," Benoit said, worry evident in his voice. "I need to do something to earn your family's trust. I don't want you to suffer because of me." "I have an idea," Lucy began, a determined sparkle in her eyes. "What if you formally introduced yourself to them? A dinner, perhaps? That way, they could get to know you better." Benoit hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "All right. It might be risky, but I'm willing to try. I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm worthy of your love." They exchanged a deep look, realizing that despite the challenges ahead, the love they felt for each other was strong enough to face any adversity. With hearts intertwined and renewed determination, they knew that the battle for acceptance was just beginning, but they were ready to fight together. The dinner was filled with a tense and charged atmosphere, with the guests in their chairs, the lights softly illuminating the table decorated with fresh flowers. Benoit, with a nervous smile, looked at Lucy, who was seated next to him, her eyes shining with anticipation. He had prepared for this moment for weeks, rehearsing the words he would say to her parents, hoping to gain their acceptance. But what was supposed to be a night of celebration soon turned into a nightmare. Lucy's cousin, Antoine, always jealous and resentful, did not miss the opportunity to cause a stir. "Do you really think you can sit at the same table as us, Benoit, knowing who you are?" He stood up, glaring, and everyone in the room turned their attention to him. "You are not welcome here. Your family, your ancestors, they were responsible for so many misfortunes for our lineage." The air grew heavy. Benoit looked around, observing the reactions of Lucy's parents. She, however, did not hesitate. She stood up, her heart racing, and faced her cousin. "Antoine, enough. You can't just throw this dirt on the table without thinking about the consequences. What happened in the past does not define who we are today. The love Benoit and I feel for each other is stronger than any old rivalry." Lucy's words echoed in the room, and Benoit felt a wave of gratitude and admiration for her. He knew that Lucy was the only one who could have enough courage to oppose the tradition and prejudice that permeated her family. Meanwhile, her mother, who was watching everything in silence, seemed torn between pride for her daughter and the pain of what the past had brought. "But you don't understand, Lucy," Antoine shouted, his voice trembling with anger. "You can't just ignore the consequences of getting involved with someone like him. What our family suffered. And what should I do?" Lucy interrupted, her voice firm but with a touch of desperation. Let fear and hate decide for me? We deserve a chance, Antoine. Everyone deserves the chance to rewrite their stories. Silence hung in the room until, with tears in her eyes, Lucy's mother stood up. Lucy, my love, I don't know if I can accept this. Her voice wavered, but there was a growing strength in her words. I have always feared that the past would repeat itself in your life, but perhaps you are right. True love can heal wounds we thought were irreparable. Benoit watched, his heart pounding. He never imagined that Lucy's mother could give in. The tension in the room slowly began to dissipate as the guests exchanged confused but hopeful glances. I am not my past, Benoit finally spoke, his voice laden with sincerity. I just want to love your daughter and build a future with her. I apologize for the mistakes of my ancestors, but I cannot be punished for them. Please, give me a chance. Lucy's mother hesitated, but something in her gaze had changed. She looked at her daughter, who was now with tears streaming down her face. If this love is true, then maybe we should try. We can't let the hate of the past destroy what is beautiful in the present. The atmosphere transformed. The tensions were set aside, and amidst hesitant embraces, Benoit and Lucy drew closer, their hearts entwining in a moment of unity. Amid the chaos, their love stood out as a beacon of hope. When they finally met, Lucy and Benoit exchanged a deep look, and she smiled through her tears. He leaned in to kiss her, a kiss that spoke of promises, of a future together, of a love that would overcome all barriers. Thus, in that magical moment, everyone in the room could feel that love had triumphed over hate, and that a new beginning was just starting.